the Community Development Committee for the Metropolitan Council from March 19th, 2018. First item of business is to approve our agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. Our agenda is approved. Now next are February 20th, 2018 minutes. Is there a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Are there changes or discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay, the minutes are adopted for February 20th. Thank you. Members, before we dive into our business agenda, I just want to make two comments, announcements on the personnel front. The first is that it's my understanding that this is the last committee meeting during which I guess we'll have the opportunity to hear from Jan Youngquist, who is leaving us after 12 years with the council, and I just want to call that out in particular and say thank you very much, Jan, for all of your work in this division and specifically around the regional park system. You've played a lot of roles and been a real force for supporting and advancing the work of the regional park system, so thank you. The second, members, is that Joel Hudding is here also. He is the new research manager for the council, so just wanted to say welcome aboard and great to have you here at the committee. So members, with those two comments at my own discretion, let's dive into the business agenda. The first item is item 2018-35, 2018 Unified Budget Amendment, Carry Forward Amendment. Heather Augustin-Hebner is here to present.
Mr. Chair and committee members, my name is Heather Augustin-Hebner. Many of you might be used to seeing from me at Transportation Committee. You'll be seeing me here now as well. Community Development is requesting an amendment to carry forward just over $266,000 in expenses and revenues into our 2018 operating budget to complete 3 projects that were initiated in 2017 but have yet to be completed. These projects include the regional forecasting model, climate change mitigation planning, and expanding energy use data collection and analysis. This amendment will advance stewardship and prosperity through monitoring development and growth patterns in the region, and will advance sustainability by supporting climate change mitigation planning and expanding energy data collection and analysis. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions?
I would move this item, Mr. Chairman.
It's been moved
Second.
and seconded. Is there discussion to the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next item is the consideration of the Southview Comprehensive Plan Amendment for the City of Eden Prairie, 2018-62. Mike Larson is here to present.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. The City of Eden Prairie has submitted a comp plan amendment for council review associated with, but not limited to, the development of a 116-unit senior residential campus, including independent assisted living and memory care units. There are a few aspects to this amendment. The city is creating a new guiding land use category called high-density residential, and they're giving this category a density range of 40 to 75 dwelling units per acre. And they're applying this designation to the 2.5 acre site where the Southview of Eden Prairie project will be built. At 116 units, the project has a density of 46.4 units per acre. And in a moment, I'll show you the project location. The city has an existing high-density residential land use category, and they're renaming this to medium-high density. They are also slightly modifying this density range for this category by increasing the lower end of the range from 6.7 to 10 units per acre. This action reverses an overlap with the medium density residential category, which has a density range of 2.5 to 10 units per acre. As shown in figure 1 of your staff report and on the screen, Thrive MSP designates Eden Prairie with a community designation of suburban. The areas affected by the amendment throughout the city are shown in red and in black. The red areas are those with the new medium-high density category and adjusted density range. The small area in black is the Southview project site. The impact of the change in density range is insignificant as most of these sites are already developed and the upper end of the density range remains unchanged. As shown in figure 2 of your staff report and on the screen, this map shows the cluster of areas affected by the amendment near the Eden Prairie Mall, including the Southview project site, which is shown in the middle of the map in black. Regional systems are shown, including the future extension of the Metro Green Line in the Highland Bush Anderson Lakes Regional Park Reserve. As shown in figure 3 and on the screen, the amendment involves the application of the new guiding land use category to the project site, a 2.5 acre site at the corner of Prairie Center Drive and Franlum Road. In the review of this project, staff found that the proposed amendment conforms to regional system plans, is consistent with council policies, and is compatible with the plans of adjacent and affected jurisdictions. The proposed action before you today is that the Metropolitan Council adopt the attached review record and allow the City of Eden Prairie to place the Southview Comprehensive Plan Amendment into effect. And 2, find that the amendment does not change the city's forecasts. Mr. Chair, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mike. Other questions?
Mr. Chair, I'll move the approval of this
Okay.
item.
It's been moved
Second.
and seconded. Is there a discussion to the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. The next item is the City of Bloomington's Friendship Village Comprehensive Plan Amendment, also presented by Mike Larson.
Mr. Chair, the City of Bloomington has submitted a comprehensive plan amendment for council review associated with the Friendship Village Senior Living Campus. As shown in figure 1 of the staff report, Thrive gives Bloomington a community designation of suburban. The area affected by the amendment is shown in the northwest corner of the city. As shown in figure 2, this map shows the amendment location in relationship to regional systems, southeast of the interchange of US 169 and I-494, and immediately north of the Highland Bush Anderson Lakes Regional Park Reserve. As shown in figure 3, the amendment involves a re-guiding of 1.76 acres from office to high-density residential to accommodate the expansion of Friendship Village, which is currently on an adjoining 23.3 acres. I want to emphasize that because the re-guiding is part of a larger integrated development plan, we are reviewing for system conformance and policy consistency for the larger integrated proposal. This aerial photo here provides a better visual representation of what's on the ground. The current campus includes senior co-op apartments, care facilities, and amenities. The site also includes a medium value shallow marsh wetland there in the middle. Townhomes that are part of Friendship Village are located to the south of the wetland. The re-guided parcel here is shown in red. It's replatted and incorporated to the larger property. And here I'm going to overlay the site plan for the campus redevelopment and expansion plan, which I'll enlarge momentarily. So again, this enlarged phase 1 site plan shows where the wetland will be filled to create space for a new residential building as part of the project. You're now looking at phase 2 of the site plan, which shows the new 2 to 5 story residential building located here. Existing townhomes are demolished and the remaining wetland basin is enlarged to the south, shown here in green, to accommodate increased stormwater flows from the larger site. This action does not replace wetland value or function. As a result, the developer is responsible for replacing the lost wetland at a 2-to-1 ratio. They have purchased credits at wetland banks in Scott and Lyons counties. So I'm going to go through our land use analysis for this comp plan amendment. The amendment is consistent with Thrive's land use policy of orderly and efficient use of land because this project makes use of an existing site to modernize its facility and expand. However, it's important to note that Thrive is also concerned about the quality and extent of the region's natural resource base. which of course has been depleted in many cases over time through redevelopment, or through development rather. In Hennepin County, for example, the county retains only 31% of its pre-settlement wetland inventory. I want to talk about a little bit about that state statute protects wetlands requiring their conservation or their replacement when alternatives are infeasible. The city of Bloomington has the authority to implement the Wetlands Conservation Act in their jurisdiction. The city has followed the appropriate process to evaluate development proposal alternatives and approve a wetlands replacement plan. A technical evaluation panel included representatives from the city as well as the Board of Soil and Water Resources. However, our conclusion is that alternatives appear to exist, including perhaps alternative site plan configurations, relocating building mass, or limiting the scale of expansion. I do want to finally emphasize that our opportunity to comment here on this proposal arises because of the project's association with a comp plan amendment. Had the city not required a comp plan amendment, we would not have the opportunity to do this review. So our findings are that the proposed amendment does conform to regional system plans. It is consistent with council policies with the exception of the Natural Resources Protection Policy of Thrive MSP 2040 and the water sustainability goal of the Water Resources Policy Plan. And that the proposed amendment is compatible with the plans of affected and adjacent jurisdictions. A proposed action for you today is to adopt the attached review record and allow the City of Bloomington to place the Friendship Village Comprehensive Plan Amendment into effect. Find that the amendment does not change the city's forecasts. 3, advise the city to implement the advisory comments in the review record for regional parks, land use, and surface water management. And finally, to strongly encourage the city to support new development in ways that preserve and benefit the natural environment and reduce development pressures that endanger remaining regional wetlands. Mr. Chair, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mike. Questions or comments about the staff report?
Mr. Chair, I'll move the approval.
Okay, it's been moved.
Second?
There's a second. Is there discussion to the motion? Okay. I think it's notable just the citing the fact that there is, a significant statement in here about inconsistency with council policy, and I just want to make note of that and memorialize that in my own comments for the record. But hearing no discussion, let's move forward with the motion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Members, the next two items are consideration of two local communities' 2040 comprehensive plans.
Wow.
Want to just make some comment about the fact that this is obviously a core responsibility of the council to review and evaluate and accept these plans as called for under the law. And I know we've had two so far, but we're obviously going to become, we've had one so far. We're going to become more expert at taking these in and having discussion about them. So look forward to a good dialogue. Raya Esmali is here to present the Stillwater Township Comprehensive Plan. Welcome.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and council members. My name is Raya Smiley. I'm a senior planner with Local Planning Assistance here to present the Stillwater Township's 2040 Comprehensive Plan update to you. And a representative from the community is also in the audience, Ms. Sherry Buss, if you have any follow-up questions later on for her. So the township is located in District 12 on the most eastern side of Washington County. It is surrounded by May Township from the north, St. Croix River on the east, the city of Stillwater on the south, and city of Grant on the west side. The township also includes a non-contiguous area south of Highway 36 and west of Stillwater Boulevard North. on this map is where the mark of Highway 36 is. That's basically where the area. And this is about 50 acre that was detached from the city of Lake Elmo and attached to the township in 2012. Thrive designated the township as diversified rural, as you can see in figure 2 of the staff report as well. This map shows the regional systems for the community. The Pine Point Regional Park and the Central Greenway Regional Trail Search Corridor are components of the regional system that are part of within the boundary of this community. The small southern portion of the township, that 50 acres, also bordered by Trunk Highway 36, and the community is not served by wastewater service. The township uses our previously recommended revised forecast by the council, and they use that throughout the plan as shown on this table, which is also table 1 in your staff report. The revisions account for the recent household changes and decreases due to the annexations of the portions of the township to the city of Stillwater. The Stillwater Township's 2040 future land use map shown here is pretty similar to the township's 2030 future land use map, which shows similar land use categories and density ranges, with the exception of a transition zone in the 2030 future land use map that was to account for the annexation area. The township has developed its plan to be consistent with the policies for diversified rural community designation. In addition, in coordination with the township and the council does not have any plans to provide wastewater services to the community within the 2040 planning period. And the township is not within the long-term wastewater service area, and no planned capacity expansions are planned. With the review of the plan, we found that the plan conforms to the system plans of Metropolitan Council, is consistent with council policies, and is compatible with plans of adjacent communities and affected jurisdictions. And with that, and as shown on page 1 of the staff report as well, listed here are the proposed actions for you today to authorize the city of, authorize the Stillwater Township to place its 2040 comprehensive plan update into effect, revise the township forecast downward as is shown on table 1 in the review record to reflect the reduced land capacity after annexation by the city of Stillwater, and advise the township to implement the advisory comments that are included in this review record for transportation, surface water management, and housing. On the staff report, the page 2 also states the standardized advisory comments that refer to next step and statutory requirements that the community would need to follow to adopt their final plan. And this language is consistent on all of the comprehensive plan updates that you've seen on Baytown Township, but you also see going forward. Well, with that, I conclude my presentation, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Raya. Raya, or perhaps Livia, I have a question about particularly these plans that we're reviewing earlier in this process, in this round, the finding around compatibility. What's the sort of process in terms of finding that a new plan is compatible with an existing plan already in force by its neighbors versus, some of these plans obviously are going to have, they're going to be the newer additions, the newest on the block, so to speak, whereas those surrounding are going to have the plan adopted from 2008 still in force. So what's the process that we go about in terms of finding compatibility that will allow us to get out of the never-ending cycle, so to speak?
Mr. Chair, I'm going to let my manager, Lisa Barajas, take that question to more comprehensively answer that.
Thank you, Raya. Mr. Chair, council members, we really rely on the adjacent community review for when communities send their plans around to all the affected jurisdictions and their adjacent communities, that communities are highlighting actually taking the time to read the plans and highlighting the elements that they find incompatible with their own planning processes. We also look for them to a required submittal requirement for their comprehensive plan is to submit those comments to us that we can see if there are compatibility issues. So we're not having to rely upon our own memory to make sure that we're catching them along the way. And I'll say in the past cycle, there are only just a handful of situations where there were incompatibilities that we really worked to facilitate resolutions with local governments. It's really in their court to decide how to address those.
Thank you for a very clear answer to a very unclear question. Appreciate that. Other questions? Councilmember Dorfman.
Just one question. So in terms of the process now, if this is approved today, and then I assume it comes to the full council for approval, just want to commend the township for getting this work done and early in the process and getting it to us. So can you tell me though the advisory comments that we make, so for around improving the pedestrian connections to the trails, for example, when we take this action and offer some changes, what kind of authority, what's the process for a community such as Stillwater Township to take these and go back to potentially amend their plan to include these sort of advisory recommendations?
Sure. Mr. Chair, Councilmember Dorfman. Our authority is actually to review this plan with the consistency and conformity to system plans, consistency with policies, and compatibility with adjacent jurisdictions. We do always provide advisory comments when we can, but it's not directly affecting the policies of the council. After the action taken by CDC, this report will go to the council next week on March 28th, and then we will inform the community of the final authorization by the council for them to go ahead and adopt the plan. So that will include a local process for adopting the plan formally, and then there is a 9-month period after that for them to send us their updated ordinances and also a final version of their comprehensive plan with an accompanying resolution that states that they adopted that plan. We don't review the final plan to make sure that the advisory comments are incorporated in that. The most important comments are the ones that come in the completeness review, which we have already gone through.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions, members? I'd entertain a motion if none.
I'll move the approval of this item.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded. Is there discussion to the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. The motion is adopted. Our next item is item 2018-72, Eureka Township 2040 Comprehensive Plan. Patrick Boylan, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, council members. Eureka Township's in the kind of southwest portion of Dakota County. It is surrounded by the city of Lakeville to the north, city of Farmington also to the north and to the east. And to the east is Castle Rock Township, the south is Greenvale, and to the west is Newmarket Township. Regional systems include 2 different regional trail search areas and also Air Lake Regional Airport and an interceptor that connects Empire Wastewater Treatment Plant with Newmarket Township. Council forecasts for the community are before you and also in Table 1 of the staff report, showing a very modest growth for the township. Future land uses, on the left is the guided land use, the planned land use. Hatched areas are showing the aggregate resources and the rest being all green, which is agricultural. The map on the right side shows the institutional uses, including some clustering of some residential uses. And then in the north is, with the asterisk, is the Air Lake Airport. proposed findings for Eureka Township comprehensive plan, that it conforms to the system plans. It's consistent with the council's policies with proposed amendments to, my mistake, that should not be on there. This should say that it's just consistent with council policies, period. There's no proposed amendment to the rural residential community designation. It is compatible with the plans of adjacent local jurisdictions and affected jurisdictions. So conforms with the system plans, consistent with council policies, compatible with plans of adjacent and affected jurisdictions. Proposed action here before tonight is to adopt the review record. That's part of the staff report provided to you, and that authorizes the township to place its plans into effect. To authorize Eureka Township places 2040 comp plan into effect, and to advise the township that the advisory committee comments and the review record for aviation, housing, water supply, and solar resources. Before I take any questions, I just want to mention Councilor Wolf is not here, but certainly she has been a fantastic resource for me and for the environmental services staff. There's been a lot of discussion around Eureka Airport, around the Air Lake Airport and the expansion and possible serving of sanitary sewer. I've been down to Eureka Township in the last 5 years. I've been down there 3 times to talk about this very issue. Councilor Wolf was instrumental in providing great policymaker support for that. I'm available for questions at this time.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious about a term used on the existing land use map. It's called extractive.
Extractive? Yeah.
Extractive?
Yep.
What does that mean?
Well, extractive relates to gravel mining. The council policy we have shows that, or states that the communities are to show extractive potential. So they use soil data and other geologic information to map this out. The idea that once it's urbanized, you really can't mine gravel over it, and that the region has put value on aggregate deposits for construction, road purposes, and things like that, as close as possible. So,
okay. And Mr. Chairman, just another follow-up.
Councilmember Cunningham.
So this institution that's there by Chubb Lake, what is that? It's in blue. Institutional.
Yep.
I'm just wondering what that is.
It's on the on the west side of the lake. I'm not exactly sure what that is.
Okay, because it's pretty big in relationship to the whole area.
There's a representative here from their planning consultant is here, but as far as I know, no one here from the township. I'm not sure what that is.
Oh.
I could find out for you after.
Yeah,
You know.
no, it's just curious, and it just seemed like a big institution of some kind that was sitting in the middle, and it doesn't seem like there's much road to it. So I was trying to figure out, okay, if it's a big institution in the middle of this place, where is the infrastructure for it? So just a question. You don't have to answer it right now. It's just
We do know. It's actually, Mr. Chair, council members, it's a conference and retreat center. So large open area, folks get together and meet there, out in the rural area, getting away from it all, one would say.
I see. Okay.
Yep. So it's not, as you had noted, it's a large area, but it's not very highly developed. It consists of a couple of buildings within the natural area around it.
Thank you.
Councilmember Dorfman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So is the reason that there's no affordable housing allocation, is it because it's zoned agricultural?
Chair Commerce and Councilor Dorfman. So the Eureka Township does not have sanitary sewer, and the connection between providing regional sewer and affordable housing is direct.
Okay.
In terms of the provision of affordable housing, no, they're not required to, but certainly, it's something they consider in terms of different types of housing options.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Mr. Chair, just not
Councilmember Elkins.
directly to this application, but it's nice to see these coming through so we can get these out of the way. But how many townships do we have? And these are fairly simple reviews, I would think, but there's lots of them, and these are communities that don't have a lot of resources to do these plans. But there's a lot of townships in the region.
I don't recall, Mr. Chair, council members, I don't recall the total number of townships exactly off the top of my head. Suffice it to say that I know that 21 of them are within Scott County and Carver County, and those two counties have the land use authority over those townships to do the planning for them. In many portions of Dakota County, many of those townships have formed a collaborative to work on this project together, precisely for the reason that you had noted, that they don't have a whole lot of local capacity to do that. So they share that resource into together. They have 11 townships in Dakota County. In Washington County, all of the townships do the planning on their own. I believe there's 6 or 7 off the top of my head. And that authority was recently delegated to them by the county. And in Anoka County, there's 1 township. Hennepin County doesn't have any townships, and Ramsey County has 1 township, White Bear Township, which is actually more municipal than township, if that's a word. So most of them are covered by a collaborative process or by the county that covered them. But you are right, many of the townships, you may recall when we did our planning grant criteria, many of these townships actually do qualify for planning grants to really help facilitate that process.
Mr. Chair, I'll move approval of this item.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded. Is there discussion to the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Councilmember Dorfman.
so I may be wrong about this, but I was like thinking, and it may have changed, Hassan Township in Hennepin County. Is it still a township?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Dorfman, Hassan Township was fully annexed by the city of Rogers a couple
That's
years
right.
ago.
That's right. Thank you.
2012, 2014, somewhere in there.
Thank you.
Our last item of business, members, is 2018-75, the 2018 annual Livable Communities Act Fund Distribution Plan. Paul Burns is here to present staff
Thank you,
report.
Mr. Chair. Just to, by way of pointing a couple things out in your packets, you received 2 copies, 2 versions of the fund distribution plan. One is a clean copy. One is a copy with the additions in yellow and the strikeouts in green, so you have at least in the major changes, so your memory is refreshed on just exactly what it is we changed. Plus, I tried to cover those changes in the business item, and hopefully we have previewed these fairly well, so that there shouldn't be any surprises. So the action is to approve the 2018 annual Livable Communities Fund Distribution Plan.
They're not linked there.
And this plan was developed and changes proposed through a couple of processes. One, if you recall, I presented a couple of times in recent meetings, information items trying to preview some of the changes we were contemplating, getting your feedback on that. Plus, it was also informed through conversations with work group with Metro Cities. Council members Wolf, Barber, and Elkins also participated in those. And I should point out that the Metro Cities organization has not formally taken a position on these changes, but hopefully we have reflected the majority of the consensus or the majority of opinions reflected in those conversations. Some individual members of that group may, have different opinions on some of the provisions. One of the big things is that we've been able to identify some balances in the accounts, so we can supplement the amounts available in some of the categories in the accounts. First one being the Livable Communities Demonstration Account. We've identified that we can comfortably find an additional $4 million to supplement the Livable Communities account. And based on our understanding of feedback we've heard from members, that 2 million would be split between the TOD category and uh, the regular LCDA demonstration account. Again, here's the normal funding levels based on history and statute is $7.5 million to the regular program, 5 million to the transit-oriented development category. So you can see the modified totals with the additional 4 million. Also, LCDA pre-development grants, we have been offering them only in the transit-oriented development category. This year we are expanding that to the regular category. And we haven't had a huge response to the TOD category, but we still think it's worth maintaining and then also offering in the regular category, but at a lower level than what we had offered in the past. And that comes out of those totals that were in the previous slide. Another thing that we keep trying to balance a thorough and robust review process with the amount of time that it takes to go through the review and time and energy of all parties involved. In particular, the advisory committee members are committing a huge amount of valuable time. So we've identified we think we can cut back on the number of advisory committee meetings, and that could result in shortening the transit-oriented development review timeline by a month and the regular category by 2 months. So that should be helpful for all parties involved. There was one category in the regular LCDA account that we heard through our discussions with Metro Cities members, that there was a perception that the transit score was a greater weight than it actually is. So we've made changes, and they're reflected in this version to clarify how that scoring is actually applied, and hopefully it's a better be able to better communicate that smaller communities that don't have a lot of transit aren't at a huge disadvantage to other communities. In the local housing incentives account, we've identified $1 million in interest and investment earnings that we can add to the statutory amount of 1.5 million. So again, this year, as in the last couple of years, we'll be able to offer 2.5 million in the local housing incentives account. And there was one provision in the home ownership category where we have a limit on how much is awarded per unit. And that has caused an issue, particularly with some of the land trust projects where they like to see a little bit more per unit allowed. And so the compromise is if you want to get more than that formula, you have to agree to a minimum of 15-year affordability term. With the tax-based revitalization account, one of the significant changes being proposed this year is since we started the transit-oriented development category, we've offered cleanup grants, pollution cleanup grants through the transit-oriented development category to the amount of $2 million a year. After lengthy discussions, the suggestion is that we discontinue that process, make that $2 million available in the regular cycles of the tax-based revitalization account. Same projects can still ask for the same amount of money, it's just that they do it through the regular process rather than as part of the TOD cycle.
Mr. Chairman, I had a question about that.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you. So I was struggling with this one out of the recommendations, in part because I think it's signaling the wrong incentives in that we want more transit-oriented development, given the resources we're putting in. Was there underutilization here?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Cunningham, yeah, there wasn't a huge demand for these, but because we were coupling that with, the idea behind it was if you had a development project that also needed cleanup, it would be convenient to apply for both at the same time. But we weren't getting a lot of projects that met that criteria. So the idea is that we're really not losing the opportunity to get cleanup funding for a project that's also going through development. It's just that that money would be available through the regular cycles of the TBRA.
Mr. Chairman, if I could
Councilmember
follow
Cunningham.
up. Thank you. So the issue may have been that we've tied that to the specific development of a project as opposed to saying projects near or around TOD areas could be cleaned up, as opposed to saying, and you've got to have a project with it. Have we thought about that as a solution as opposed to doing away with it? I just think, given what we focused on with regards to TOD and Thrive, that this is sending the totally wrong message.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Cunningham, the thought process is that, again, we're not losing anything, and if there's a site that's near a transit station and needs cleanup, they can still get cleanup funding. It's just that if they're not coupled to a transit-oriented development project, it's not really TOD. There's still the opportunity to do cleanup for a project. It's just that it's not focused on transit-oriented development.
No, I got that. I was asking a separate question. However, Mr. Chairman, I was asking, could we use this money around transit projects that didn't have a specific proposal, for example, on a TOD route that fits our definition?
Mr.
So that,
Chair,
yeah,
Councilmember
that's the
Cunningham,
question I was asking. I got you.
Clean up a site without having a project.
Yeah.
That hasn't been considered, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Cunningham, other than we have a separate category for seeding equitable economic development for project sites that are in areas of concentrated poverty.
Mm-hmm.
We still have $1 million committed to that category, so you could apply for a cleanup funding, or what we've seen mostly is investigation or asbestos or lead-based paint abatement in existing buildings there.
Mr. Chair.
Councilmember Dorfman.
Can I just follow up? So if the problem that we're trying to solve is that we didn't see enough applications for this funding, for the TBR TOD and the LCDA TOD, are we sure that this is the answer? Because some of what I heard is that smaller communities in particular felt they weren't competitive. And so that was one of the arguments. The other is that they tended to be smaller, so they didn't have the staff capacity always to put these applications together. And also that they didn't really understand, they wanted some clarity around what did it mean to have a demonstration project. And so I don't know how eliminating it and say solves that problem.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Dorfman, I'd like to come back to those. Those I think are a little bit separate from the cleanup in the TOD areas. One thing is we are committed to working with metro cities and taking other steps to communicate better with the smaller communities to help them overcome some of their perceptions of their difficulties. Well, maybe I will just respond to those questions. In terms of staff capacity, most of these applications are at least done in part by the developer anyway. For that matter, Minneapolis and St. Paul staff don't do a lot of the actual application themselves. And in most of these projects, the developers are very much involved in filling out the application. So the staff capacity is an issue that can be overcome by both partnering with the developer, as well as we're available to help staff of all levels of community fill out the application. And as far as the competitive issue, we are committed to doing some outreach with the smaller communities to help them overcome that perception of lack of ability to compete. Back to this issue, I think the main issue thought was that the money might be better able to be distributed through the regular program than the TOD category, just because of the relatively low demand for that category.
Thank you for that. I think there might be one clarification that I want to make is that as it is currently and has been in recent years, the TBRA dollars, just as with the demonstration account dollars, are awarded to projects. So they're not untethered brownfield cleanup dollars. They are specific to a proposal that relates to a project. And that relates to the law because the statute says these investments need to be made for growth or retention of living wage jobs and affordable housing. So there has to be a project that is proposed to us by a local government, and that is the premise for the award. It's a separate policy question, I think, if we wanted to explore what's the possibility of a brownfield remediation source that would not be awarded in the context of a project. I think that's a worthy discussion, but that would be a different policy choice.
Mr. Chair, I can give an example too. There's a recent project along the Hiawatha line, the 4041 Hiawatha. It was an older warehouse that needed cleanup, and that did get a TBRA grant through the regular program, but it really didn't fit the TOD category. So that's an example of a project that we might see more through the regular program.
And Paul, also, isn't it the case that the SEED program also is relatively independent from a specific project? So that is an exception.
Mr. Chair, it's completely independent of a project.
Right, so you'll speak to that too.
As a matter of fact, you can't have a project to be able to apply for a SEED. I know you need a scorecard sometimes.
Right.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Councilmember Dorfman.
It just seems these series of recommendations, and I should probably let you finish, but it seems like we're moving away, as Councilmember Cunningham said, from our principles around land use planning connected to transit-oriented development. I mean, we're reducing pre-development grants for TOD projects. We're eliminating this TBRA TOD category, and then you also talked about reducing the transit scoring criteria. It just sounds that way.
Chair, Councilmember Dorfman, those are separate issues. I don't see this in any way moving away from a priority on transit-oriented development. We still have $5 million in the development fund, the demonstration account, targeted just to transit-oriented development. The TBRA money still would be available in transit stranded station areas. The pre-development money is just simply a reaction to the demand that we've had. And one other reminder is in all of these accounts, we've written in language in the fund distribution plan that allows us to shift money between these categories if for example, people don't apply for the full 9.5 million in the regular LCDA program, or vice versa through the TOD. So we can shift those around. And again, we're not losing any of the TBRA money. It's just being done in hopefully a more efficient way.
Yeah.
Councilmember Elkins.
I'll respond as well. I mean, in this particular one, my feeling is that we were getting too many pots that were too small, and by combining this particular one, there's enough money with enough general that we were gaining flexibility.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Councilmember Cunningham?
So that might answer my question. I was wondering where the recommendation came from, because the way you structured your memo, it sounded like all the recommendations came from metro cities. And so I'm wondering, is this a metro city specific recommendation, or is this coming? I'm just trying to understand where the recommendation is. This a staff recommendation? Is this that a council member recommended, or did it metro cities recommend it?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Cunningham, there was actually some difference of opinion at the metro cities group. The central cities like keeping it in the TOD category, and some of the others like having it in the regular program. This recommendation comes from staff's interpretation of what kind of direction we've gotten, both through the conversations at metro cities as well as feedback we've gotten from committee members.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's helpful, Mr. Chairman.
Mm-hmm.
Can I then,
Dorfman.
so then can you follow that up? So if there was a difference in the Metro Cities work group, if there was a difference in, in their views on this, Central Cities, you said, wanted to leave it as is, or not eliminate the TBRA TOD category. Why is that? What were their arguments for keeping it?
Mr. Chair, I don't think there was a really, strong opinion, just reactions to the suggestion. I think it was just, well, there's more of these station areas, and I don't think they wanted to sound too parochial, but there's many of the stations are in urban areas, and so they thought maybe it would be best to keep it there.
Councilmember Elkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My perspective would be that historically more of the bin have been in the central cities, but with the green line extension, the blue line extension, the gold line, and the orange line, it's probably going to be more widely distributed around the region anyway.
Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would just, from the participating in the Metro Cities work group, this was not something that was talked about in detail there. This is something more that came with, I think, those conversations that we had as talking about the program between staff and council members.
You agree?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let's proceed.
We're getting towards the end here. This was something that staff came up with. Every year we poll the Metro Transit, MPS, the TOD office, and in our staff to see if there's any need to update the threshold at which we add station areas and lines to the list of eligible station areas under the transit-oriented development category. And also based on our experience with the pre-development grants, even though there's not a huge demand for them, we've come up with some new, the original criteria was that a line had entered preliminary engineering and would be operational by 2020. Well, obviously as time goes on, that needed to be updated. So the consensus we arrived at through conversations with all the subject matter experts at staff was that a better threshold now for the BRT and the bus rapid transit and the light rail lines was in the environmental review process. So once a line has gone through environmental review and that's been approved, the line is likely to get built. So then a developer might be more inclined to make an investment in a development-oriented transit. Also, based on what we have been hearing about the progress of the Gold Line, that has now entered environmental review process. So the suggestion was that for pre-development, if a line has entered environmental review, we would offer pre-development grants. Once the environmental review has been adopted, then they'd be eligible for the development grants. So what that boils down to is this year the Gold Line would be eligible for pre-development. Probably next year it'll be eligible for development. We would add that to the map. And so here is the, there we go. So the blue highlighting is the gold line for pre-development, and then those two dots in the northwest corner there are actually two expanded high-frequency express bus stations that now meet the threshold that we originally had arrived at back in 2011. So this is just a matter of updating the map and uh, uh, updating the criteria for light rail and bus rapid transit station.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just want
Councilmember
to
Cunningham.
say that when we originally developed the TOD policy along with how it fit into this grant scheme, we actually worked out a relationship with both the metro cities, the outer ring suburban communities, and the central city. So this was the negotiation in part around making sure that this had some geographical distribution to how these dollars would be allocated. So that's why I come back to the TOD thing. It's like, seems like we're reliving the same battle again some years later. That plays itself out again. So I'm probably not going to vote for this matter for that reason myself, and I'm going to in part have gotten some strong signals from the city of Minneapolis that they are opposed to this as well.
This is just a list of, through the discussions we've had through my information presentations and the Metro Cities group, there are other issues that we will continue to explore for possible improvement for next year or the year after. These are a list of some of the questions that we'll be continuing to work on. Funding limits for the TOD, LCDA TOD. Should we allow pre-development or allow small area planning grants through the pre-development grant process? Should there be more restrictions on land acquisition? And then we're committed to doing more outreach with the smaller communities in particular, and all communities for that matter, and helping them better understand the process, what the criteria are, and help them be more successful.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just add one
Councilmember
comment.
Cunningham.
I have a lot of confidence in Mr. Burns, and we've worked together over the last 7 years, and so this is no reflection on you or your skill sets. I do, I think if we could tweak that section, I'd be more than willing to, because that's the only section I have an issue with of this proposal is the TOD transit, the TOD TBRA.
TOD.
See, even after all these years, I still have trouble saying it. But that's the only section I have trouble or struggling with. So if there was another way if we had some recommendations around at least having more discussion on that item, I'd be open to that. But the way it's worded right now, I can't vote for it. So I'm putting that out as an olive branch to my colleagues to say I'm willing to have a conversation about that, negotiate something else. But I really feel like, given all the work we've put into this whole TOD thing, that I feel pretty strongly that we should at least have a conversation or another conversation if there's time to reach some other conclusion there.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chair, the only reaction I would have to that, and I don't have a problem having more discussion, it's just that we really need to have the fund distribution plan adopted at the next council meeting in order to be able to continue our grant cycles.
Mr. Chairman, I got all afternoon.
Well, Councilmember Cunningham, I think this is
It can move forward with my no vote too. I mean,
This is the
I will
appropriate
make
venue.
the same argument at council. Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I apologize.
Sure. I think this is the appropriate venue for that dialogue. And of course, 2 weeks ago, we missed an opportunity to have some of this conversation because of the weather. So I think it is important to maintain our timetable that we have the conversation. There might be, and I'd look to my colleagues about their thoughts on this issue. Perhaps there's an opportunity to treat the change regarding the TBRA program separately from the other changes that are recommended in the business item, because that seems to be the one where there's some more disagreement than on the other items, the business item. Councilmember Dorfman.
Well, Mr. Chair, I share Councilmember Cunningham's concerns. And I'd certainly be willing to separate that out. I assume this is coming to the full council a week from Wednesday. So I just want to, I would prefer to do that just so I can understand a little bit better. So it sounds like there wasn't a whole lot of discussion about it at the work group. And what there was some disagreement or differing views. So I'm still not quite sure where it's coming, where the recommendation is coming from either. And I'm not quite sure why yet. I understand the issue that Councilmember Barber mentioned about smaller pots, but.
Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And can you help clarify for me? As we understood this, as it was coming to us, it was a program, the TBRA TOD fund was not being utilized very much. So that money was just going over to the regular TBRA later after a different council action. It doesn't preclude projects from, they do still get scored based off of access to transit and that type of thing. And so I think, personally, I think it's somewhat semantics.
Mr. Chair, all I can say is that we put into the plan what we interpreted to be the direction that we had heard informally from committee members through the course of two earlier information items. And to get, excuse me, I think I didn't answer one of Councilmember Dorfman's question about the clarification on the transit score that I talked about earlier. That was under the regular program, and it's just a matter of clarifying. One of the concerns of the smaller communities was that they felt like they were competing against Minneapolis and St. Paul, and through the description of how we go about the scoring process, we were able to explain that like communities are scored under like scoring criteria or context. So I was talking about clarifying scoring under the regular LCDA program, not the TOD category.
But, and so so I think I understood what you just said, but that doesn't mean that you're reducing the criteria for scoring TOD projects.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Dorfman, no, not at all.
No. And
Councilmember Elkins.
thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, and not even under the regular program either. I think it was just the way certain cities were interpreting the existing verbiage. They thought they were being disadvantaged in a way that they weren't really.
Yeah.
So the language is just clarifying that to make it clear that that's not the case.
Thank you.
Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to further go on from that, is it really focused the language more towards the connectivity of the land use within whatever, so it connects to the community, whether that is by pedestrian trails or transit, but it gave some options. And the other piece of it from the transit scoring piece is it had been bundled together, and so with some other things, and so it just defined which points went to access to jobs versus transit and that type of thing. So it was a little clearer for some of the communities. And I actually think we've just looking at the scoring criteria reflected really well the discussions that were had both at Metro Cities and among the council members.
Yeah.
Councilmember Elkins.
Further emphasize, I mean, with the changes in the verbiage, it puts almost more emphasis on walkability, livability issues for those small communities.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Councilmember Cunningham.
Yeah, and I totally have respect for both my colleagues that gave this advice back to staff, and want that to be clear because I've worked with you over time, so it's not about that. I think for me, perhaps we could think about having some extra credit or points put on the TOD portions for the TBRA, increase the I'm just throwing out a suggestion to try to get to yes. So that's my intent. That would might help my feeling that we're doing away with the TOD piece. As something that we could think about, because I think part of it is we've got something that isn't working very well.
Guidelines here.
That's apparent, meaning we're not getting what we want, which is more usage for the TOD. That's why we set up the program. So the question that I asked, and I think Councilmember Dorfman had put that out earlier, was, is this the solution, or are there other solutions that we could reach that actually got out the policy goals that we were trying to get at when we initially created this program? So that's really where I'm trying to go, is what was the policy objective. And my understanding was the policy objective was to use these resources to clean up sites along with projects. Now that I understand that, Mr. Chair, thank you for that clarification, to spur development of land along transit-oriented development. I think that's our goal. And if that's the goal, I'm not sure we're going to get to the goal by doing what we're doing, even though, because I actually do think we do have to target these resources as opposed to having them as universal things that we're saying are out there. So I'm willing to say, maybe we put some additional scoring in to help boost the usage for the TOD projects of the whole pot, since we're going to put that into the whole pot.
Thank you,
That's a
Councilmember Cunningham.
compromise position.
I believe that there is scoring already having to do with transit in the TBRA. Paul, could you just give us a recap of how that's currently weighted?
Currently, Mr. Chair, there are 15 points out of 60 in the oops, that's wrong. That's investigation. There are please bear with me. I'm trying to find the spot here. There are 35 points in the category of orderly and efficient land use in the regular TBRA. And some of the bullets there include supporting growth in the region in and around regional transit through adaptive reuse, infill development, or redevelopment to make the best use of public and private investment. And then there are a number of supporting private investment in areas of concentrated poverty, accommodating growth through increased redevelopment density. So I think it's fairly safe to say that any of those projects that are in those transit TOD areas are already going to score high in the regular TBRA category.
Mr. Chairman, I'm confused, Mr. Chairman. I'm confused because we set up something originally under staff recommendations, and that was to set up this separate fund. And now we're saying that we never needed the separate fund because they would have gotten those points anyway. And so I'm a little confused why we would have had the separate fund in the first place, if in fact it didn't have any real meaning to it. So that's what I'm struggling with now, given what Mr. Burns just said.
Councilmember Elkins on this
I'll
point?
respond to that. So I think what we've realized over time is that the TBRA program, by its very nature, tends to favor projects that are going to score well under regular TBRA, just for the kinds of things that you just mentioned. If you're trying to do a greenfield development out in the suburb, you're not even going to apply for this program.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, I mean, my sense about, this recommendation, and I do think maybe it makes sense for us to consider this part of the business item separately from the rest. But my sense is that there's two things that I think are proposed to be retained. That is, first, the dollar amount between the two pots is simply being combined. So I don't want there to be any misunderstanding in the public, et cetera, that there's the proposed, cut of this program or anything like that. The resources remain. As Councilman Elkins has said, the emphasis is very often on the developed parts of the region. That's what this program is for, and this is what it serves. And also, I think notably, unless I'm mistaken, the sort of policy that we've had in place in terms of the limitation on the amount of those investments that are made to projects in the two central cities is there is not a limitation on that front. So if those projects in the central cities are the highest scoring in that particular round, then those are the projects that are funded for TBRA with certain limits per individual city. But in terms of that part of the region, that limitation does not exist as it does in other LCA programs. So I think this is a good recommendation in the sense that it manages the administration of these programs in an efficient way, and I think it reflects the fact that the TOD, the LCD, or excuse me, the TBRA TOD program has been undersubscribed in certain rounds, and I think that causes additional administration and missed opportunities. So,
Sure.
Councilmember Dorfman.
Procedural question, the two documents that you referred to at the very beginning that show the changes that are being recommended, where do we access those?
Mr. Chair, they were in the agenda attached to the business item.
Keep scrolling.
Right.
Yeah, I did. I went all the way through that. I don't see strikeouts though, or
That's-
change.
The
That's
second
the clean
half,
version. Keep going.
Oh, okay.
it's highlighted in yellow, the proposed changes.
Perhaps I
So,
didn't
members,
go far
what do you
enough.
think
Ah, there it is.
about moving forward with a motion for these recommendations, with the exception of the TBRA TOD change?
So the suggestion is just make them two separate motions.
Correct.
I'm okay with that. I think we'll continue to support bringing them together for the reasons I've said today, but
Okay.
I think it's fine having that discussion.
Okay, I agree. I would entertain that motion.
Staff feel like they understand the motion? If so, I'll make it. So basically, we're saying the motion would be that we move forward, but with the suggested changes to the TBRA programs as a separate motion, basically. Because I think they're self-contained.
Yes, in the business item, we would say the items 1, 2, and 4 then would be, and 5, would remain in Councilmember Elkins' motion, and then we'll take up item 3 in a separate motion. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Okay, it's been seconded. Is there a discussion to that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, thank you. That is adopted. Then let's take up the item number 3 in the business item, tax-based revitalization account changes, as a separate motion. I would entertain that.
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved,
Second.
seconded. Is there discussion on this item? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Nay.
Okay, the motion carries.
Does it?
It does. And I'll look forward to, I believe it does. We have 2 nays and 3 ayes, correct? Okay. Councilmember Chavez, you voted in the affirmative, right? Okay.
Okay.
So the motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, I thought he voted twice myself.
I thought I heard him twice too.
Well, we'll look forward to, I think, some more
So we
conversation
all
about that item.
Just trying to
Well,
see.
thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll move forward from there.
Okay, thank you, Paul. So members, I would propose that for the committee report, that we bring items 1 and 2 as consent items to the full council, and then items 3, 4, 5, and 6 will be business items for the full council. Okay? I don't hear any objections to that.
Can I
Councilmember
just
Dorfman?
I may have missed this procedurally. We took 2 votes
Right,
on the fund distribution.
yes.
One was, I thought, to divide the 2 issues. And then one was to vote. So did we ever vote on?
We did, Councilmember Dorfman. Yeah, what we did was we voted first on all of the items in that staff recommendation with the exception of PBRA.
Okay,
And then the
sorry,
second
I
was.
missed that. I thought we were
just
just, for some reason,
Okay.
taking a procedural vote to just divide them
Okay.
first. But fine, okay, forget that.
We're good.
We're good. Good.
Okay, that concludes our business agenda, members. We have one information item, which is an update on the Regional Parks Policy Plan work. And I know that Councilmember Elkins, along with Councilmembers Belander and Wolf, have been involved in monthly meetings since October or November on this work as part of a work group. So thank you, Steve, for that. Look forward to the update on this important document. It's taking shape. Really taking shape.
This is
It's done.
Jan Youngquist, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and commission members. And Dan and I are happy to be here today to talk to you about the update to the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan. State statute provides the underpinnings for our policy plan and requires that the plan generally identify where property should be acquired for the regional park system. We are to establish priorities for acquisition and development, include a 5-year capital improvement program, and estimate the costs of the recommended acquisition and development. State statute also requires us to comprehensively review the plan every 4 years. So as you know, the regional planning cycle is on a 10-year cycle, and so we've got these 4-year increments in between, which is why we're before you today. So the Regional Parks Policy Plan that Dan just passed out was adopted by the Council in February of 2015. We're underway with the update, and the intention is to have it adopted by the Council in late 2018. And as you know, the policy plan is aligned with Thrive MSP 2040. The policy plan has 2 main sections. One is our policies and strategies, and this is the part of the plan that really defines the interaction that we have with our 10 regional park implementing agencies. The other main portion of the plan is the actual system plan, which identifies which parks and trails in the metro are part of the regional park system. And obviously this interacts with our 10 implementing agencies, but this is also the piece of our plan that relates to local comprehensive plans. So there are 5 main policies within the policy plan as the council works to preserve and expand the regional park system. And so the first one is with regard to recreational activities and facilities, and this is looking at maintaining a balance between recreation and natural resources in the regional park system. We have a policy with regard to siting and acquisition of regional parkland, so identifying lands of high quality natural resources and put them in a protected state for recreational and conservation uses. We promote master planning and integrated resource planning between jurisdictions. We have policies with regard to funding the regional park system. And then the 5th policy is with regard to protecting the public investment in the acquisition and development of the regional park system. And this is the piece that really makes our regional park system unique and is how we interact with regard to local comprehensive plans. So that was the piece with regard to our policies. This is our system plan map for looking out to 2040. So it includes all of our existing and planned regional parks and trails. There are a few regional park search areas, which are shown by the red dots on the map. These were actually part of the 2030 Regional Parks Policy Plan and have been carried forward into the 2040 plan. So there are two in Carver County and one up in northwestern Anoka County. And these are very long range search areas. In fact, the search area in northwestern Anoka County was identified back in the 1970s as a potential regional park site. As you can see by this system plan map, there are a lot of light orange and kind of lavender colored lines. And what these are regional trail search corridors. So our plan really looks to provide trail connections between our regional parks and trails. So if you think of Minneapolis and the Grand Round system of trails connecting parks, it's taking that vision and expanding it out throughout the metropolitan area. And so these are all very general areas. This is where in the future, the Regional Park Implementing Agency will prepare a master plan that will determine the boundaries for a park, the amenities provided at a park, as well as the alignment for the regional trails. So what this system plan does is right now we protect about 55,000 acres of regional parkland in the metro area. This plan would take us to 70,000 acres. And currently we have about 400 miles of regional trails in the 7-county metro. This plan takes us to almost 1,100 miles of trails.
Mr. Chairman, I just had a
Councilmember
question.
Cunningham.
So I see all the purple or lavender in the western part of the metro area, and I don't see any on the eastern part. I'm just wondering why that is.
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Cunningham, so when we updated the 2030 Parks Policy Plan in 2010, there were a lot of really good ideas that came through the local comp planning process for additions to the system. And so in 2010, a lot of search corridors were added throughout the metro region, and those are shown in the orange. At the time, Three Rivers Park District, which oversees trails primarily in suburban Hennepin County, they were doing a system plan at the time, so they weren't prepared when we updated the 2030 plan to propose any additions to the system. So when we did the 2040 plan, we kind of left a placeholder for them, knowing that they weren't able to come forward with things in 2010. We allowed them to do that in 2040, and that's why you see that in suburban Hennepin County. So as I mentioned, the system plan is really what interacts with the local comprehensive plans. So when we're reviewing comp plans, we're making sure that local communities are planning for everything in our system plan. And so we made a conscious decision as part of this policy plan update not to touch the system plan because as I mentioned, this plan will be adopted by the council at the end of 2018, which is exactly when the local comprehensive plans are due. If we made any modifications to the system plan, we would then have to send out system statements and say, thank you, communities, for spending 3 years developing your comprehensive plan. Now you need to amend it. And so we decided to with this policy plan update to really focus in on the policies and the things that interact with our 10 implementing agencies rather than doing anything that would interfere with the local comprehensive planning process.
Oh, and now I get to talk. Questions? I don't know if you caught it when Jan was going through at the beginning, but she made what I think was a kind of Freudian slip. She said, alive with thrive. And it kind of like warms my heart to hear that phrase. I'm going to use it from now on. This discussion today is really the beginning of the conversation with this level of committee. We've got a lot of discussion with other organizations as a part of this update. But at this point, what we just want to do for sure is catch any questions, any issues that you might have as we continue to go through this work. We've initiated a lot of stuff, and we just want to make sure that we're catching stuff from the council member level. So, any questions?
Councilmember Chavez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not a question, but a reminder. When the process occurs for engagement outreach, to be sure that that is hyperactive. And then when the communication occurs, repeat, I don't know how many times it's going to take to explain to the audience. We don't build the parks. We don't pave over the trees and the chipmunks. As much as some people might like to do that, we don't do that. That is, they need to be looking to the authorities. Otherwise, they're just going to be inundating me with stuff about this. I keep going back to say, please talk to your county commissioners. Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Chairman, one, thank you for doing this work, and Ms. Youngquist, it's been a pleasure to work with you all this time. Really, really admire your dedication and your professionalism in this work. So I just want to say that to you from here. So we did a lot of work over the last several years on this question of connections to areas of concentrated poverty, of trails. I remember having some conversations with Mr. Gunyu about different connections that they were thinking about. I still see some of those in the planning stages to ensure that Brooklyn Park and Brooklyn Center, for example, are connected to the trails in a better way. So I'm just curious about one, we developed an equity toolkit, and I'm not sure how that connects to this document, and how does that work? Because it seems like to me that this policy plan has to encompass those issues for the parks. And I know there were some changes in legislation last year clarifying the council's authority in relationship to the park implementing agencies. So if you could help me out to understand what the connections are and how are we maintaining our focus on our priorities with regards to parks, which equity is one of several.
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Cunningham, that's actually a little bit later in the presentation.
Oh, all right.
So thank you for queuing that up.
Okay, all right.
One question I have is, and I know we've talked about this before, but what is exactly the relationship between the regional trail network and the regional bike, the RBTN? Could you just help us kind of articulate what is the nexus of those two things? I know they're similar, but not the same.
Sure. Mr. Chair, so the RBTN, the Regional Bicycle Transportation Network, was designated in the 2040 Transportation Policy Plan, and that really focuses on bicycles used for transportation purposes. And so the RBTN includes a series of corridors and alignments that are, there was a whole set of metrics that was used to determine what should be on the RBTN, connections to major job centers, regional facilities, etc. So there are a number of our regional trail corridors that are on the RBTN that are heavily used for commuting. We've got the LRT corridors, LRT regional trail corridors that radiate out from downtown Minneapolis, and there are a lot of trails that are used for dual transportation and recreation purposes. So not all regional trails are on the RBTN, especially as you get out into the exurban area of the metro area. So there is some overlap, and being on the RBTN allows a park agency, if they're requesting or applying for federal transportation funds through our regional solicitation, being on the RBTN gives them extra points as part of the regional solicitation.
Okay, thank you.
So regional trails can qualify for the regional solicitation federal funds, but RBTN cannot qualify for regional parks funding unless it's a regional trail.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Elkins.
No, one of the big focuses in the transportation policy plan changes we're also making is closing gaps between the city and county plans. Overcoming physical barriers to connectivity is a big focus on that one right now.
Right. Let's continue.
So the timeline for our plan update, we started scoping back in August. And from October until May of this year, we're having a number of different discussions, which I'll get into on the next slide. We have to have a draft plan written by the end of May. We'll be coming back to you in June to set the public hearing. The public hearing on the policy plan will be conducted at a CDC meeting in August. And then we'll close the public record, respond to comments, make any revisions, and then bring the final plan back for you for adoption in October. So as far as the process, we've got a number of parallel things that are all happening at one time. So we're doing community engagement. We've been doing focus groups with immigrant and communities of color. We're going to be doing surveys in parks. We've had a number of regular planning sessions with our 10 regional park implementing agencies to talk over issues. There are some internal staff teams that are working on this. And Mr. Chair, as you alluded to, there's a council member work group which consists of council members Wolf, Elkins, and Melander, who meet monthly to provide policy guidance. We're working closely with the Metropolitan Parks and Open Space Commission, and we are doing engagement with the park agency boards and commissions in May, where we'll go out and do presentations and answer questions from those boards.
Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For one question I have is a very district-specific question. So are you meeting with both Scott County and Three Rivers? Because Three Rivers, or Scott County contracts with Three Rivers for that area?
Yes. Yep. We are scheduled for a work session with the Three Rivers Board, and we'll also be meeting with the Scott County Park Commission.
Okay, thank you.
When we started scoping this process, we had a couple of really good meetings with the park implementing agencies to get ideas from them. There were a lot of good things talked about and some things that we can't do within the scope of this policy plan, but have given us lots of ideas for planning for the future, as well as convenings with park agencies to talk about things. So the feedback that we got fell into some broad categories. So obviously land acquisition and development was very important. There was talk about serving first-tier cities and how important development is to some of our younger park agencies, such as Scott and Carver County, that are trying to establish regional park systems. Changing demographics was very key. Urban population growth, the aging and the diversifying of the population going out to 2040. Funding, surprise, surprise, is always a hot topic with our 10 park agencies around operations and maintenance. Met Council bonding was a big topic, desires to increase funding. There's a lot of ideas around recreational facilities, so changing recreational activities to meet changing users and different demographics, and looking at the Mississippi River as a major recreation amenity came up. Natural resources, the natural environment was important. There was talk about climate resiliency, invasive species, and protecting significant natural areas. And then the final category I called Parks and People. So trying to foster future stewards of regional parks, the idea of encouraging use of parks versus screen time. Um, and attracting new young visitors. So we had some really great conversations. Not all of this can be tackled in this policy plan update, but we're filing those for future reference. So to get into the work areas for the policy plan update, as I mentioned, state statute requires us to do a 5-year CIP, as well as to estimate the cost to acquire and develop the system plan. There are a few things that happened legislatively over the past few years that will need to be acknowledged in our Parks Policy Plan. So the Department of Natural Resources updated the rules for the Mississippi River Critical Corridor area. And so that gets into standards for development. And that's really implemented at a local community ordinance. However, we have been working with DNR and had discussions about acknowledging the critical area rules in the master planning process. So when a park agency prepares a master plan for a regional park or trail, acknowledging whether it falls within the critical area and also acknowledging that they will comply with the critical area rules or get the necessary approvals. Another big thing that happened, there had been legislation in place since 1985 that directed all of the interest earnings that the council earned on park funds were diverted specifically to North Mississippi Regional Park, which is in Minneapolis and Brooklyn Center. Back in 2015, the legislature put a sunset date to that, which was December 31st of 2017. So as of the beginning of this year, statute says that we are to use the funds for the use and betterment of the regional park system, which gives us opportunities to really determine how those funds should best be used. And so that's a lot of what our public engagement is revolving around, is finding out what's important to the people of this metropolitan area as we determine how to use those funds. And I think, Councilmember Cunningham, this might be what you alluded to with regard to our Park and Trail Legacy Fund appropriation. The 2017 legislature added to the Legacy Fund appropriation a statement that funds must be used only to fund the list of projects approved by the elected representatives of the implementing agencies. What this essentially did was, in the policy plan, we had language with regard to using the equity toolkit, and that the council would have involvement in the prioritization of the project list from the agencies that would be funded with the legacy fund. We also had a minimum percentage required for agencies to spend legacy funds under the category of connecting people and the outdoors. And so the 2017 legislature essentially negated our ability to prioritize projects or require a minimum percentage of legacy funds for connecting people in the outdoors. So we are responding to that with changes in the policy plan. We do have a commitment, however, to continuing to use the equity toolkit. It doesn't negate our ability to use the toolkit to evaluate the impact that proposed projects will have on strengthening equitable use, but it does take away our ability to have conversations about where projects are prioritized. The next section, we're looking at clarifying and modifying language. So I mentioned that we're not making any changes to the system plan, the map that identifies what parks and trails are part of the regional system, but this gives us an opportunity to look at the criteria for system additions. So we can change language with regard to how we look at system additions that will set the stage for future conversations on evaluating additions to the regional park system. We're also looking at having some discussions about recreational activities and facilities that are appropriate for the regional park system. and clarifying some language with regard to how we reimburse agencies for projects through our capital improvement program, which is funded with council bonds and state bonds. We're looking at clarifying some language in our park acquisition opportunity fund. A couple other things, we're going to be developing indicators so we can track our progress in implementing the plan, and then developing a program guide. So the program guide, this is a new element that we're doing. And so our policy plan currently contains high-level policies and strategies, the 5 that I talked about. It also includes part of the mechanics of how we administer funds, they're not high-level policies. And if we ever want to make changes to that, we have to amend the policy plan, which is a long process, having to go through a 6-month process of a public hearing, et cetera. And so what we're looking to do is to pull out the financial administrative requirements into a program guide, which would be a sister document to the policy plan. And so it would contain grant rules and guidance on how we implement the policy plan with regard to our finance policies. And it doesn't affect the system plan map or any sort of local comprehensive plans. By pulling it out, anything in there would still need to be approved by the council, but wouldn't have to go through a 6-month public hearing process, which would allow us to be a little bit more nimble in changing things as things change. We've run into some challenges, for example, with our Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund grant rules, where new situations pop up, but we can't accommodate them without going through a long process. So this gives us some nimbleness. This is you.
Again, questions? So during that time, Jan did talk about the equity toolkit and the discussions that have happened since the legislation changed. Should we continue that discussion, or open all questions?
Mm-hmm. Let's open it up. Members?
I'll offer an observation that might prompt something, or no prompts. If you want to get out of here, that's fine. Jan's ready. So I've joined this process. I was sort of at a distance when this document was written, and was working on Thrive very much in parallel. This update that we're working on right now is really, and the alignment between this document and Thrive is really quite remarkable amongst our system plans. This update is the one where we get to gain the benefit of 4 more years of experience working with the same set of ideas. And it's been really interesting. Jan talked about the early discussions we had with implementing agencies and other folks. It's been really gratifying to see how many interpretations and levels of support and kinds of clarifications that people are coming up with to do the intent of the plan, but fine-tune it to the realities of doing work, across 10 agencies and a council, and with all these different funding agencies. So the equity toolkit in particular, people mentioned that it's been the whole topic of equity, which, Rose and Thrive reflected in many ways in this plan. A lot of great support because of the conversations that just having that topic on the table has brought up. So I think everyone's benefited from that discussion, and we continue to work the language and work the approach and the update. And so as we come back in the coming months, this will eventually come back through here with an actual draft of language. Look for that along the way.
Dan, to that point, one question I had is, I think as a committee, I found it really productive in, I can't remember what year it was, when the council did the very deep analysis of utilization of the regional park system by communities of color and New Americans in particular. And I thought some of the conclusions that came out of that research, at least, were disruptive to what I expected. For example, I thought transit accessibility, which would have a much stronger kind of connection. That was not the case at all, and I always appreciate when my expectations are wrong and disproven like that. I guess my question is, does this update contemplate kind of extending that kind of research? Are we going to make that something that's longitudinal in nature so we can have a sense of, with the toolkit and other approaches, are we making headway? Are we reaching a broader audience? How do we know that?
Mr. Chair, council members, as I'm going to put that under the bucket that Jan talked about as indicators. And there's definitely a commitment to doing the kind of research and measurement and reasoned approach that everybody can bring back to their communities, including at the metro level, including at the agency level. So great deal of interest in that, great deal of interest in the kind of system-wide view that the council is able to take and match up with some of the research capacity that we have just with the data sources that are available. So I would answer in the affirmative.
If I could, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, if I could just add to
Please,
that.
Jan.
So as you may recall, one of the key findings from that research was that a barrier to participation in the regional park system by communities of color and immigrant communities was lack of awareness. And so that's why we established a Regional Parks Ambassador program. And interestingly enough, several of the regional park implementing agencies have also done that now. They've used legacy funds to fund ambassador programs to help increase awareness. I think it'll take time for us to truly see the impacts of that.
Thank you. Councilmember Cunningham?
Yeah, I just wanted to, a couple of things. One is, it seems like we heightened over the last several years the conversation. And the feedback I get from Minneapolis and others is that they appreciated us at least raising the issue around equity, access, and opportunity for our regional park system. So the part of my question, several years ago, we had a joint meeting of this committee and the Parks and Open Space Committee. I thought it was a good exchange for me to get a better understanding because we have one liaison there. And I don't know if we want to have or think about doing something like that again as we go through this process, so we get to thinking of the folks that we've appointed to that group as we think about what are the issues that come forward. Because I occasionally interact with Anthony or Catherine, who are people that I had appointed at different times, but I haven't got the sense of the whole committee and what's going on there. And I'm sure Councilmember Wolf has that kind of undertaking, but just an idea as we go through this process, because I think they're more steeped into this than we happen to be, but I think we could think about something like that. But I'm just putting that out there because what we don't want to do is get surprised that they're thinking somewhat differently than we're thinking about these issues as this comes before us. And I don't know if that's a good idea or not. It's just something I thought about quickly, I should say.
Councilmember Elkins, I don't know if you have any thoughts that you want to share about the work of the work group and that point of intersection.
I think in regards to the equity work, I think one of the things that I've always observed, and I think Councilmember Chavez would probably second this, is that support for the park system is heavily dependent on usage.
Yep.
If people aren't out there and in it and using it, you're not going to have the agencies aren't going to have the support they need to maintain the system time. And I felt that we should encourage that line of thinking among the individual agencies themselves, because I'm out there or you're out there out looking for birds. Everybody looks like us.
Yeah.
and we got to get past that.
Yeah.
Councilmember Chavez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to pick up on that is, I think you're channeling part of one of my hemispheres. But on behalf of Councilmember Wolf, I think what we would echo is, or whine about, on behalf of the implementing agencies, is the lack of the legislative acknowledgement of its statutory obligation to fund operating. That's just stupid.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Now, going with that wonderful positive comment I just shared, the lack of my getting fired up about this has nothing to do with your work, which is I've always admired. That's not the issue. Where I get appalled is what the legislature does when it complains about our control and then exercises control so that we can't impact implementing agencies and what they're supposed to be doing. And something as so threatening as a park presenting something about an equity challenge to some body out there in the legislature, I'd love to take them on anytime, anywhere, any place, and then get them out in the park off their butt with some kids that might be just from communities of color that have never been there before and see what the hell's going on. But that's just whining and preaching to the sky. But I want to make sure those that somewhere in the electrons those comments get made. But it's not directed at you. Thanks.
Other reactions or feedback? Guess not. Yes, Dan.
I would just like to reiterate the fact that this is the last item of the last meeting, the last day of Jan's 12 years here. She may have a few things to do when she gets back upstairs to finish up, but it's been an absolute treat to work with her. So thank you.
Well said. Thank
You're
you
in good
again, Jan.
hands with Dan with this moving forward.
Okay, good. Well, thank you very much for the update, and we'll look forward to the next steps as well.
Thanks.
Thank you. With that, members, we'll be adjourned. Thank you.
Next case.